Hello, everybody. Good evening. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations, First Storytellers, and traditional owners on the land we are gathered on tonight, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. This festival takes place across the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people, and we work, create, and gather on unceded sovereign lands. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to elders of the lands across this continent that this live stream might reach. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Ruby Rose. I'm the Artistic Director at the Emerging Writers Festival. You might be familiar with that line if I have emailed you in the process of putting together this festival. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the EWF 21 program. It's kind of surreal to be here in person in front of you all, sharing the space and this program with you. Last year our launch was done via video. This year it is in person and it is also being live streamed, and that sets the tone for the festival going forward. From June 16th to the 26th this year, you'll be able to engage with art and storytelling in the places around you, both in person and online. You'll connect with other writers and artists and hopefully learn along the way. We know we continue to learn as we work with the moving beast that is planning a festival in modern COVID times. You may or may not know that all of us, as in from the people who've worked at EWF over the years to the artists and attendees and supporters, all of us connected to the festival in some way, turn 18 this year. With happy birthday to us all. With this program, we invite you to celebrate that milestone with us. Tonight, we're launching with the help of 4 artists from this year's program. And in the spirit of coming of age, we're thrilled to have Patterson, Mia Nie, Yamiko, Marama, and Olivia Musket read their responses to the prompt, The Words That Shaped Us. However, before we hear from tonight's wonderful artists, I'd like to tell you a bit about the program with the help of our program coordinator, Millie Baylis. Putting together this festival, like any other festival, takes a lot of work and time. You might already know that EWF runs an open artist call out every year to hear from you, our community of emerging writers and readers across the continent. We do this so that we can hear about what you might like to do at our festival, but also what you'd like to see the most. This year we were overwhelmed again by the number of artist applications we received. Our long list grows every year, and this year it was very long. It is also always difficult to whittle down. So all in all, we've got over 60 events and projects running across 11 days of programming, and we have over 220 artists creating work and sharing discussions in those events and projects. We have some festival favourites returning and some new exciting and experimental things happening under stars, between worlds and across forms. Kicking things off on June 16th for opening night, we invite you to consider Collective Imaginings. At ACCA, you'll hear the words and music of 4 incredible First Nations women, Sue-Ann Hunter, Veronica Gorry, Madeline Heyman-Reber, and Alice Skye, as they reflect on storytelling in collective imaginings and the power of language to shift and shape perceptions. The centrepiece of EWF, the National Writers' Conference, is happening once again this year and is online. And I'm honoured and excited to share with you our 4 ambassadors for this year, who are Tony Birch, Claire G. Coleman, Elena Gomez, and Sisonke Msang. This is a group of writers who we admire as people and as experts in their craft, and they'll be at the one-day online National Writers' Conference on Saturday, June 19th, along with a lineup of industry professionals. It's the place for emerging writers who are hungry to hear from leaders in their field to be. You'll develop your skills, meet your peers, and forge connections within the industry. This year we have a number of exciting collaborations with other festivals and organisations, on top of our usual partnerships with old friends like Arts Access Victoria and the Other Film Festival, Australian Poetry, Black and Bright, Express Media, the Wheeler Centre, Writers Victoria, and many more. We're thrilled to include new partnerships with Essex Books Festival and Metal Culture in the UK, and a bit closer to home, Footscray Community Arts Centre and Science Works. We believe that storytelling happens everywhere, and that a writer is a writer no matter their experience or their bylines, and we hope that this program inspires and reinforces that. To tell you a little bit more about the program, it is my great pleasure to introduce EWF Program Coordinator, Millie Baylis. Millie is a Millie is a writer and an arts worker and the program coordinator here at EWF. I really could have just left it at that. Please welcome Millie.
Hello, thank you, Ruby. My name is Millie, and I'm very lucky to be the program coordinator here at the Emerging Writers Festival, here to tell you a bit more about our program this year. So I would also like to acknowledge that I'm speaking tonight from the unceded sovereign lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations. I pay my deep respects to their elders, past and present, acknowledging that sovereignty was never ceded and recognising their ongoing fight against colonisation, as well as their continued care for the country that we meet on today and must be responsible to. So it feels really special and slightly unbelievable to be in an actual room full of writers and readers and people who you maybe recognise from Twitter for the first live EWF event since 2019. Planning a festival during a pandemic means lots of touching wood and crossing fingers, and while it feels so good to finally be with our community again, we also know now how quickly things can change. We know that while many of us might have Zoom fatigue from the last year, for many others, online events might still be the best or only option. So the EWF team said, why not both? And this year, as Ruby said, we're thrilled to present a hybrid online and in-person festival. So hello to those watching from home too. The Emerging Writers Festival has always prided itself on being a festival not just about, but for writers, whether you feel comfortable calling yourself that yet or not. Whether you've been working for decades and are finally ready to pitch your debut novel into the world, or if you're just starting to secretly, quietly put words on a page, we welcome you. For those who have no interest in writing themselves but are passionate readers, we very warmly welcome you too. Some of our featured festival writers will be familiar names, but many more will be the names of people that you've not yet heard of. We hope that this festival will be another introduction to all of your future favourite writers, as well as a place to develop your own craft, regardless of your age, experience, or genre. So this year, as always, we're considering the power of words. Our artists tonight will consider the imprints that words leave, the bruises, echoes, and reverberations. We remember the words that shaped us, a mother's words, a lover's words, a bully's words, the words of protest, of policy, of a good joke. The words from that speech, that song, and of course that book. As emerging writers, it's important we acknowledge the writers who came before us, the ones who shaped our thinking and our writing. We know to be good writers, we must also be good readers. So we wanted to celebrate the writers and words that shape us in unexpected ways. Sasonke Umsamang, one of our brilliant festival ambassadors this year, gave a talk a few years ago where she says, if a story moves you, act on it. She argues that we can't confuse simply listening or reading with acting. Umsamang is specifically talking about non-fiction storytelling and warns against the tendency we can sometimes have to confuse simply consuming stories with doing something to affect real social change. And this is something we'll be exploring more during our online National Writers' Conference too. More broadly though, we often talk about writing's power to move us, but what does it move us to do? Maybe it's a small good thing. Maybe reading moves one to water the garden, or to donate money, or to burst out singing, or to help change the world in all the ways it currently needs changing. Maybe it rouses one to help support the underpaid writer whose work moved them, or to take the time to tell that writer how much their work meant to them. Throughout our festival this year, we will continue to celebrate and interrogate the power of words, their power to move us and change us, to cause us to act, as well as the good and simple pleasure of them. And so it's my pleasure to tell you a bit more about the 2021 Emerging Writers Festival. As Ruby said, from the 16th to the 26th of June, we will feature over 60 events and projects with more than 200 brilliant storytellers of all kinds. This includes the return of EWFX, our co-produced performance events with community collectives, this year including the brand new Disability Justice Network with Dreaming Disability Justice, the Datnook Library Collection launch, a Thin Red Line spoken word performance, and the intro room with Sex Work in Space. These will be followed by our late night literature readings, with some stellar lineups from The Bogong in collaboration with Black and Bright, featuring First Nations artists from around the continent, to Not Safe for Work at Loop Bar, a night of queer sex writing, to Tending to Joy at the End of the World, an evening about poetry, joy, and crises. This year, we're also really excited to go to the ScienceWorks Planetarium for an evening of storytelling under the stars, and to the State Library to hear the soundscapes of writers and musicians in collaboration. Another event I'm really excited about is Imagining Abolitionist Futures, where artists who all have lived experience of incarceration, who we don't hear from nearly enough at events like this, will share their dreams of a world without police or prisons. And our hosts will be reading stories submitted by women currently in prison on their behalf. Online, I can't wait for a meal at the table, where 6 food writers will cook personally significant meals and share the special stories behind them. We hope that this will be the one time you actually want to hear the personal story that accompanies the recipe. For writers wanting to work on their craft, you can come to one of our online full-day masterclasses led by amazing industry experts. This year our masterclasses are on creative nonfiction, digital storytelling, and multilingual writing. You can also come to one of our free writing workshops across our city's libraries, or to a lunchtime literature conversation about craft, with topics from writing relationships to writing for children. And finally, don't forget to go on our amazing poetry race across the city of Port Phillip to find posters of poetry by some of our festival poets. I'll leave it there because there's so much in our program and I don't want to bang on. You will be able to explore the full program and start booking your tickets as soon as this event is over. For now, I'm really excited to hear from the incredible lineup of festival artists that we have here tonight to share their own stories of the words that shaped them. So get ready to book your tickets at 7:30 and we can't wait to see you at the festival.
Millie and I work really closely together, as you may be able to imagine, so it's always really lovely to hear what she's excited about and what her thoughts are about the program. So thank you for that. Next, we have Luke Patterson, who will be joining us via video. Luke is a Gamilaroi poet and folklorist living on Gadigal lands. He's interested in the ways bioregional identities and consciousness are expressed through localised and vernacular forms. Luke's research and creative pursuits are grounded in his extensive work with Aboriginal and other community-based organisations. Luke was also an EWF at-home resident in 2020. Please turn your attention to one of the screens near you to hear from Luke.
Hi, my name is Luke, speaking with all my love and respect for Gadigal people and Gadigal lands where I live and where I work. I will be reading a poem called Master Caucasoid, a psychodrama. I initially tried to write something filled with all the wonderful stories of kinship and community and family and all those kind of things that I love and experienced a lot growing up. However, I also experienced a flood, a torrent, a saturation of the national stories, the national mythologies and fictions that shaped me in ways that are sometimes hard to confront. Watch out for the master's ill, his ill logic love, his desire to enlighten the cranial dark of all otherness. little Aboriginal boy, Master Caucasoid, will have you duped in this fiction. You'll be evicted to part-time Edens full of grief and ill omens. History haunting a pastoral plot for a bloody blood continent. Is in your head, you see, this affliction got you sick in the head from his criminal cranial renovations, filled it with a civil story of a forgotten then. His purest remnant, our savage life, funny old hobby, anthropometrically osteological, the descent of man for the colony. Watch out for the master's ill, his illogic love, his desire to enlighten the cranial dark of all otherness. Headhunting the purest parts, he'll tempt you, the vain aborigine, the Caucasian Caucasoid master, savage in master love then absorption, sees you as his son, salvaging artifactual fetishisms, outlandish in your Caucasoid body, his property, a fiction man, a man-made wonder. Take in his death mask. What wild, white, savage mongrel mutations mould your outlandish Caucasoid body? A birthright in concert with his unlovely love hobby. Safeish on this fantastical property, this bloody blood continent, his pastoral graveyard, Master Caucasoid's macabre acreage. He's the master of dark arts, unquenchable lusts. You cut down his heir, his palace, his fair go. Go, go, go. Tell him his dreaming sickness. Watch out for the master's ill, his illogic love, his desire to enlighten the cranial dark of all otherness. Watch out, little Aborigine, little pale pickaninny. If you're not careful, he'll make you his figurehead, his domesticated. No more law scars, no more hormone, just breastplate, certificate, charged by the dot. Be one of his minister, of the cross of the cabinet. A government strive to the highest office in the land, and rule as quantumized priest-king, kingdom in ruin, in fractured fractions, in the savage lawless lock. The country cracks beneath us. A split consciousness, victim and prize, under the weight of death duties, curiosities resurrected, renewable indifference. Fact of the matter, living in hell, incarcerated, brothers and sisters, prepare for another day of mourning, our inherited sadness. Watch out for the master's ill, his illogic love, his desire to enlighten the cranial dark of all otherness. Don't dance for him, don't share with him the little world beyond. Lily-pilly fields where you emerge strong, adorned in seasonal language and nakedness and seasonal love, as legend tells us. Can you sing between his lies, our bones, our blood, our lands, our seas, our skies? Breathe in the living history.
That was Luke Patterson, and it's fitting that his reading was brought to us via video because he'll be hosting an online event. It's called Elemental. It'll be happening on Friday, June 25th. It features an incredible lineup of artists working across disciplines, bringing you a multimedia experience rooted in, you may have guessed it, the elements. I cannot wait to see what they have in store for us. Next up, we have Mia Nie. Mia is a Chinese-Australian comic artist, zine maker, and award-nominated ex-poet. She's been published in Penciled In, The Suburban Review, Comic Sans Journal, Strange Horizons, and Castles in the Sky. Her work explores the complexities, contradictions, and deeply felt desires of transgender subjectivity. She's passionate about understanding queer history and imagining queer futures. Mia is currently working on her first graphic novel. Please welcome Mia.
Hi, everyone. Whoa, okay. Hey. Hi, everyone. Wow, I can't see anyone. This is great for me. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. My name is Mia. I want to preface this reading by saying that I wrote this piece about my voice, and then it turned out that I had developed vaping-related laryngitis, and that it would take me weeks or longer to fully recover my vocal faculties. I've been told that I'm sounding pretty good tonight after a lot of rest and quite a lot of warm-up. I'm telling you this not to elicit sympathy, but because I think it's extremely funny. And I really hope that you enjoy this extra layer of irony if my voice does end up cracking or breaking throughout the course of this reading. I would be embarrassed, but I grew up on a website called DeviantArt. So the great embarrassments of my life are already behind me and also a matter of public record. My username was evil random guy blah. It's over. I'm talking about Anne Carson tonight. Anne Carson is a poet and translator of ancient Greek theater. She's also an essayist. And ancient Greek theater, Athenian theater specifically, is a tradition that, in its original context, was performed exclusively by men. And the women were played, of course, by men in drag. Now, I started reading Carson when I had just decided to try to become a woman. More specifically, a certain kind of highbrow, lit-savvy online woman affecting some vaguely dislocated melancholia, which seemed, at the time, to be the woman du jour, and I think still is. In my mind, womanhood wasn't a trivial project, like some fleeting hobby or temporary fixation to be adopted and then discarded like a change of clothes, okay? I'm a perfectionist, so if I can't be a perfect woman, then I shouldn't even try. As part of this endeavor, it only made sense to me to read the favorite female writer of all the most female women that I knew. That writer turned out to be Anne Carson, and the women were non-binary lesbians. That's true. In The Gender of Sound, Carson writes, "It is in large part according to the sounds people make that we judge them sane or insane, male or female, good, evil, trustworthy, depressive, marriageable, moribund, likely or unlikely to make war upon us, little better than animals, or inspired by God. These judgments happen fast and can be brutal. Aristotle tells us that the high-pitched voice of the female is one evidence of her evil disposition. For creatures who are brave or just, like lions, bulls, roosters, and the human male, have large, deep voices. If you hear a man talking in a high-pitched voice, you know he is a catamite. I didn't want to be a catamite. I didn't want to be one of those Nancy boys of the Athenian stage. No, what I was after was total and absolute ontological transformation. Pretty straightforward, I know. I wanted a phenomenological transformation, right? A metamorphosis, a metaphysical reconstitution. I wanted a plastic surgery of the soul. I couldn't just dress like a woman, or walk like a woman, or fuck like a woman. No, to catch a woman, I had to think like a woman. Womanhood was an iceberg, and I was strapping on my scuba gear. I was getting ready to dive deep. And as part of my gender transition, I've been relearning how to speak. In professional terms, this is known as vocal feminization training. In other words, I'm trying to learn how to sound like a woman instead of a sissy. You can take hormones after a male puberty, and it'll change lots about your body and your mind, but the larynx, once broken, cannot be easily restored. So much of voice training is oriented towards naturalness. I'm even training to feminize involuntary sounds like coughs and sneezes. It turns out that O sounds are involuntary insofar as one is not conscious of the anatomical mechanics of sound making. See, when a pubescent boy croaks or sirens, his mind is adjusting to anatomical changes, orienting itself instinctually to the body's new shapes. This process is one of rehearsal to the point of phenomenological readiness to hand, in Heideggerian terms, wherein the larynx does not consciously register as an object separate to one's subjectivity. A total feminization process remaps one's synaptic network totally, displaces one's learned behaviors and neural connections. Bury the male self, and whatever is left must be an absolute and inalienable woman. In Plain Water, Carson writes, Danaos was a hero of ancient Greek myth who had 50 daughters. They loved their father so much, it was as if they were parts of his body. When Danaos stirred in his sleep, they would awaken, each in her narrow bed, staring into the dark. Then came time to marry. Danaos found 50 bridegrooms. He set the day. He carried out the wedding ceremony. And at midnight on the wedding night, 50 bedroom doors clicked shut. Then a terrible encounter took place. Each of 49 of the daughters of Danaos drew a sword from alongside her thigh and stabbed her bridegroom to death. This archetypal crime of women was rewarded by the gods with a paradigmatic punishment. Danaos' 49 killing daughters were sent to hell and condemned to spend eternity gathering water in a sieve. But yes, there was one daughter who did not draw her sword. What happened to her remains to be discovered. I hate voice training. I place considerable self-worth in my ability to make words, which is shocking, I know, here at the launch of a literary festival. Of all the things about my body that I resent, this foreign shape inside of my throat is the worst, not just because the sounds it produces invite speculation and ridicule and all manner of dysphoric affects, but because reorienting myself against it makes me feel so clumsy and dumb. I can't just be good. I have to be perfect. I have to become the most female woman on God's green earth. Carson's Electra exclaims, "Do I not live? Badly, I know, but I live. Please, sister, spare us the tantrum. If I'm to live badly, I'd rather not live at all. I want to be a woman of heavenly grief and earthly desire. My lamentations must belong to that sacred canon of girly pain. Listen to me, not to the words I'm making, but to how my word-making shapes me. Ah! Dive with me, baby. Clothe yourself. The water is deep."
Thank you very much, Mia. Mia could write anything, and I'm sure it would be great, but is actually running one of our Writers' Night School sessions on graphic storytelling. So that'll be on Friday, the 18th of June, just upstairs from where we are now in the workshop space here in the Wheeler Centre. Our next artist is Yamiko Marama. Yamiko is a writer, therapist, and food truck owner from Melbourne, an inaugural recipient. I could never say that word. Inaugural recipient, there we go, of the Wheeler Centre's Next Chapter Fellowship. She's currently working on a debut memoir that explores family relationships alongside growing up as an Australian woman of African heritage. Yamiko is also a contributor to the anthology Growing Up Queer in Australia. Please welcome Yamiko.
Thank you for the warm welcome. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation whose lands we're on today and pay respects to elders past and present, as well as the traditional owners of the Bunurong people, the custodians of the lands on which I wrote this on. So it seems important for me to start by explaining that I am the kind of person who will pack 6 novels for a long weekend away. It takes up half my luggage space and doubles its weight and draws looks from my partner every time, who can't help but roll her eyes. So I cannot bear the idea of not having a good book to read, whatever mood I find myself to be in. Now, I say this not because I think it's a personality trait. It's like pretending that having a record player in Melbourne is quirky, rather than a sign of, just living in Melbourne and being middle class in your 30s. But rather just to acknowledge the challenge of describing the books that have shaped me into a 10-minute conversation. Now, I could start by launching into the book that I've brought along today, and I have actually brought it. But in order to understand its significance, it is important for you to also understand who I am and who I was when I first started reading for myself. For I haven't always been the glorious creature that you see before you right now. I do have a certain confidence, not in the traditional sense of being the life of the party or being at ease in any party. It would probably be too easy. But rather enough to get by as a queer black woman who sometimes just doesn't give a fuck. But to introduce you to the books that have shaped me, I need to introduce you to the person I was when I first started reading and when I needed reading the most, which was a chubby child with a lazy eye who often said weird things that popped into her head and daydreamed a bit too much to function, and who in primary school voluntarily signed up to chess club during lunch times, which kind of says it all, really. B, the teen who thought often about all the things that she was not blonde, not feminine, not delicate, or conventionally beautiful, which felt endlessly exposing. And lastly, C, the teenager who took on the world's pain, absorbing it because, I'm a Pisces, and then made a professional career of it by becoming a therapist in her 20s. So as you might imagine then, books were whole worlds of safety for me, a place to be seen, a place to rest. Books provided me with language and comfort when I struggled to provide that for myself. So that brings us to these glorious things, these novels, these life jackets. The book I'll be talking about today is called Cairo Hughes, and it was a book published in 1996 when I was 7 years old and written by Millie Murray, who was born in London but is of Jamaican heritage. You might not actually be able to see me holding up the book, but it still has the pricing label stuck on the back for $9.95 from Bowen Bookshop. I can't exactly remember how old I was when I selected the book, but it does have a dark-skinned girl on the cover who you could say resembled me a little at the time. I didn't often see black people as a child in my suburb or on TV or as central characters in books. So as someone who does often judge a book by its cover, you can imagine why the little version of me picked this one out. It's a thin book too. It's literally 125 pages, and I read those 125 pages religiously for half a decade. The story introduces Cairo Hughes, the main character. Cairo is 16 and black, adopted into a white family who she's grown up with and who she loves dearly. Cairo and her family have just moved from a small English town to London, where Cairo meets and befriends black people for the first time in her life. And it's in this context that Cairo begins to explore what it means to be black, both the joys but also the hurts that come with this existence. The novel talks about the impact of hypervisibility, with Cairo, the main character, recounting. Even though I'd lived in the village all my life, mine was often the only black face in a sea of white. When I was little, people were forever stopping my mum and asking or saying how cute I was. But as I got older and people still noticed me, I didn't feel quite so good about standing out. I tried not to let it bother me, but deep inside I felt hurt and confused. I could relate. I had a black father and an African heritage, but I was an Australian child growing up in a very white suburb with a white mother and a white extended family. I'd also only ever known life in relation to my race. My mother would recount stories of how, as a child, people would approach her, and this is randomly off the street, mind you, to inquire, "Where did you get her from?" Like I was purchased on sale. In this way, the book introduces the insidious and coded forms of racism that one can experience, as described by Cairo's newly established, confident and black best friend, Diane. Diane says, well, they don't come up to you and say, "I hate you, push off," but they have an attitude. For instance, our next door neighbour's a real idiot. He works for a big bank in the city and is always going on about how he loves the Caribbean and our food and all that junk, trying to give us the impression that he loves black people. Then his daughter, who's a blonde, blue-eyed, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth type, gets herself a black boyfriend. A 100% 24-karat gold black man, looking like you and me. He's 10 foot tall, has muscles coming out of his head, and can win the Mr. Universe title without any trouble at all. So what happens? Him next door has a fit. Reading this, it seemed to me we all needed a Diane in our lives, and perhaps a Mr. Universe too, depending on what you go for. But it was passages like these that provided me with an understanding for all the times that something had felt off in the way that someone had spoken to me, yet on the surface it all seemed to be superficially okay. Often, in my experience anyway, issues around race and racism can feel difficult to pinpoint, a gaslighting, if you will, and without a way to put context around them, you can spend the rest of your life invalidating every single experience you've ever had until it wears you away to nothing. If you'd asked me at the age of 10 why I loved the book, I wouldn't have been able to tell you, or at least not truthfully anyway. But it became my handbook. When I couldn't validate these experiences for myself, at least not yet, I could for Cairo. I could feel hurt for her and cry for her and witness her experience. Eventually I'd learn to do the same for myself and even better, develop language for it. The character Cairo eventually seeks an interest in her heritage, becomes less apologetic about it, sets boundaries in her relationships while showing up for those that she cares for. I'm still learning how to do this as an adult, by the way. While I may not have applied these things immediately, it's a journey, folks. I do believe it invited me to consider the ways in which I could live and exist in a safer and healthier way. And that possibility alone was enough to keep me going. I don't know if the author Millie Murray had her own version of Cairo Hughes, a novel that she'd read religiously growing up, or whether she'd written it because she needed one. We don't always know the intention of writers, and perhaps that is the most magical part. The beauty of both reading and writing is that the writer is only somewhat in charge. If we are lucky, as readers, we pick up a book, see what the author has left for us to find, and then take ownership of it, taking what we need for ourselves. When I was preparing for this event, I came across an online quote from the author Millie Murray. Murray said, "Although I had trained as a nurse, to me writing was a white, educated occupation. Having read lots of books, it never dawned on me that people of colour wrote them. I'd had a similar realisation upon first reading Maxine Beneba Clark's memoir, The Hate Race, which I'm sure you all know, which was published in 2016. It was perhaps the first time that I could imagine a world in which my story and writing could be published here in Australia. It seems to me that we can get caught up as writers in being literary or being successful or winning awards, and that's great and all. But perhaps, though, the greatest gift we can give is providing possibilities for the future. We can do that, both in the words that we leave on the page, as well as who we are as writers and as the humans sitting behind it all. So wherever you are, Millie Murray, I want to say thank you. The childhood version of me survived a little lighter, thanks to you. And I also want to say thanks to all the Black women writers, First Nations Black women and Black African diaspora writers who have slowly, piece by piece, provided me with a guide to live in this world. I'm constantly trying to be a little more authentic and a little braver. Your words, characters, and the very acts of just being yourself have supported me to do that. Thank you.
That was so lovely and interesting that you picked to talk about an author and a character, considering you'll be at Amazing Babes. So Amazing Babes is returning this year, and Yamiko will be performing there as well. So you'll be invited to wander in admiration as we celebrate the many wonderful humans in our artists' lives that they've chosen to applaud, whether they are fictional or not. It'll be hosted by Trey Turner, aka So Marvelous Cold, and it'll be taking place at Common Rooms on Tuesday the 22nd of June. I'd now like to introduce our final artist for the evening, the wonderful Olivia Musket. Olivia writes about disability, the arts, and random things that pop into her head. Her writing features in the anthologies Meet Me at the Intersection, Women of a Certain Rage, and Growing Up Disabled in Australia. She writes theatre criticism for Witness Performance and has presented work at the Emerging Writers Festival and National Young Writers Festival. She's been published in various places around the internet. In 2020, she was awarded the Leslie Hall Scholarship to work on her novel for younger readers, and in 2021 was the runner-up in the Kill Your Darlings New Critic Award. Please welcome Olivia.
All right, got to get my tech sorted. But first I'd like to acknowledge that I'm reading from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I remember the first book I ever read. Probably not the first book I ever read, but the first book I ever picked out of the prep reader's box. It was called Ouch! And it was probably ancient and out of date as all the prep readers were in the year 2000 in a public school in the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne. The illustrations were terrible, the text unmemorable. But what I do remember is the excitement and pressure of choosing a book to take home. There were so many books in the level white box. I needed to read them all, but I was only allowed to pick one measly book. What I did not realise was that for the next 7 years of my primary school life, I would be required to complete this same ritual every single weekday. And the pressure never lessened. As I moved from level white to pink, through yellow, orange, red, green, blue, into purple, and finally to the almost mythical black stickers, I would feel the pressure to choose exactly the right book to take home. I also remember the day when I graduated out of the colour system and even the more advanced number system. It was a scandal. I was only in grade 1. Most of the grade 2s in my composite class hadn't accomplished that yet. I was no longer confined to the classroom reader box, but could choose any book that I wanted. This meant the most revered of all, chapter books. I was proud and I was smug, but mostly I was excited for more books. What all this really signified was just the rest of my life being a bigger version of the take-home reader's box, never being able to choose what to read next because there are simply too many options. In the 20 years since then, absolutely nothing has changed. Before the readers and after the readers, there were the endless books read to me by my parents. They are where my love of reading started. Every night a story, if I was lucky, several stories. I don't think of either of my parents as particularly bookish people, not in the feverish, scary way that I'm a bookish person, but I can only think that I can only think that my scary bookishness is their fault. So many of my childhood memories involve quietly reading a book with my mum, or laughing ridiculously hard as my dad did silly voices and read books he'd read 1,000 times before with the same gusto as if he were auditioning for play school. When I think of the words that shaped me, these are the ones that come to mind. Because these childhood words, the family story times, or listening to yet another crappy out-of-date reader from the classroom set, these moments are the ones that instilled in me the life philosophy that words are love. As I grew up, this philosophy, worldview, core value, whatever you want to call it, grew stronger as I was handed more and more evidence of its truth. If my parents ever had to go away, I was handed a book, always with an inscription inside the cover. Whenever I was in hospital, there was invariably a book, which they would read to me after my surgery when I couldn't. In a particularly memorable incident in my late primary years, my dad announced that he wanted to read to me a chapter of Anne of Green Gables every night. A few chapters in, it became apparent that he hated the book with a passion. Too much schmaltz, not enough fart jokes. But he kept reading because I was enjoying it so much. I subsequently formed a deep, lifelong love for Anne Shirley and all her adventures, and mostly Gilbert Blythe, my first fictional crush. Even if I didn't know it, words and reading as a form of love was firmly entrenched in my belief system when I actually started noticing it. My grade 6 teacher, who I adored, putting aside novels which she knew I'd love, and letting me take home the class novel to catch up when I'd missed a day of school, simply laughing when I couldn't help but skip ahead and read the whole book. In year 7, when I lost the vision I did have, my dad, friends, teachers, all pitching in to read me that 7th book in that series about a wizard child aloud, so I could enjoy it at the same time as everybody else. This is back when audiobooks were wildly expensive, still on CD, sometimes even cassette, and never released at the same time as the hard copy book. That's a lot of words. If that's not an act of love, I am not sure what is. My year 8 English teacher, a huge influence on me, sending me a dramatised audio version of Philip Pullman's Northern Lights instead of homework when I was at home recovering from a painful surgery. To this day, friends geeking out with me over brilliant books or beautiful passages, giving me hardcovers of books I love so I can foist them upon people who I think must read them, and allowing me to give them extremely long lists of books they absolutely have to read. To me, these are all acts of respect, friendship, and love. Nowadays, more often than not, special people in my life get a book when a gift is required. I spend ages choosing exactly the right book, and it gives me so much joy when they read and love what I've chosen. If I ever give you a book, it's so much more than paper, glue, and ink. And if I ever give you a book recommendation, it's definitely not a random suggestion. These decisions aren't made lightly. They're a great responsibility. Books have the capacity to change lives, create friendships, open up worlds and possibilities, bring peace, solace, laughter, understanding, joy. This is not a new concept, or even a vaguely original idea, but I'm constantly flabbergasted by absolutely how true it is. At the beginning of this year, I had my heart somewhat broken by an individual who may or may not have actually been worth my time. Oh, laughing at your own jokes, uh-oh. I did all the usual things, cried alone, cried to my friends, ate cake, watched crap TV, ranted a lot, and tried to reason the whole thing out. But the most cathartic thing of all was opening up one of my too many reading apps and slamming my finger down on delete on a book he'd heartily recommended I should read just the week before. It felt so liberating to banish that book into cyberspace, to know we would never share those words. He'll never know, but to me, it was a giant therapeutic fuck you. Words are love. They can also be healing and power. There's so many books that I've read as a teenager and adult that have shaped me as well. The ones I revisit time and time again, the ones I pick up when I need a friend, comfort, affirmation, confidence. But the ones that built me from the ground up, the ones that laid the foundation of me, are those first books. The school readers' classic tales, picture books. The Peepos and Guess How Much I Love Yous, the Molly's Hares and More Spaghetti I Says, the Very Hungry Caterpillars and Wheels on the Buses, the Hawaii for Wadney Watts, Possum Magics and Pedro the Braves, the Lucy Maud Montgomerys, Beatrix Potters, C.S. Lewis's, Mem Foxes, Pamela Allens, Anne M. Martins, Paul Jennings, Andy Griffiths, and the seemingly endless Aussie Bites. The books that, when I think of them now, still fill me with the same sense of joy and love and hope for the future that they did when I was first hearing them or reading them, cuddled up to parents and siblings as a tiny bookworm. Given that I was unsuccessful in locating a copy of Ouch, I'd like to leave you with an excerpt from one of the books that brought me here. A cornerstone of my existence, a gift from my mum that was read over and over and over again, but mostly by Dad. It's about little Sophie Adams, who had a voice so big that folks claimed they could hear her from Corinth County clear to the Oklahoma border. I hadn't read this book in so many years, but it's always lurking not that far from the forefront of my mind. I've been totally blind for about 15 years now, and I've forgotten what a lot of things look like, but I've never forgotten the illustrations in this book. I haven't forgotten the words either, and not because they're anything transcendently special, but because of the complete wave of love and happiness that washes over me whenever I remember them read aloud to me in my dad's approximation of a southern drawl. If ever I need a pick-me-up or a confidence boost, these words somehow appear to me, my own personal internal pep talk. So without further babble, I present to you my words to live by. I don't like spinach, I don't like liver. Last week I fell into the river. I bumped my knee, I scratched my nose. I lost my shoes, I tore my clothes. Whenever trouble passes by, I don't worry, I don't cry, 'cause I'm a cowgirl, don't you see? A yippee-ki-you and a yippee-ki-yee. Thank you.
I'll be 1 second. I have a back injury, so that was fun time getting back up. All right. Thanks, Olivia. That was a really great note to end on. Olivia will be hosting, perhaps fittingly, because, obviously fittingly, we programmed her. But, due to the performance that we just witnessed, which was great, it is a performance event called Lullaby. It's being run in partnership with the City of Port Phillip on Sunday, June 20th. Sometimes all you want is to sip on a cup of tea and listen to a good story before bed, and that's what Lullaby will provide in an online setting. So you'll be invited to put on your pyjamas and settle in for a cozy night of bedtime storytelling. I don't know your life. We have poured a lot of love into this program. I just remembered that I wasn't speaking loud enough, so I hope you've been able to hear me. But we would absolutely love to tell you about every single thing in it, but that would take a really long time. You may have noticed that this year we don't have a physical program to hand out this evening. Instead, we're setting the program to go live on our website as soon as the event is over, and we hope you are excited to see it. We do, however, have some lovely bookmarks. I don't know if you can see them, but they will be up the back there for you if you'd like to grab one. Just before we go, I would really love to say some thank yous. So first of all, thank you to all of our speakers tonight. You've given us a really wonderful taste of what's to come for EWF, and very excited that you have been here. Thank you also to Amber and Linda, who have been interpreting this event for us. As I'm sure you know, this festival is nothing without its people. So a huge thank you to our brilliant team for holding it all together. We continue to come up against changes and challenges, and I am forever grateful to all of you. Thank you to our I'm the artistic director. You know that video? I did that last year. I used the wrong title, but you know that video of Snoop Dogg where he's like, "I'd like to thank me"? That's not what I was doing. I'm really sorry. I meant to say Executive Director Alice Muling. Thank you. Our Program Coordinator Millie Baylis. Our Marketing and Publicity Coordinator Catherine Hung. Our Operations Manager Zoe Rabb. And our Associate Producer DM Nguyen, who will have the lovely bookmarks for you when you leave. Thank you to our board for supporting our vision and us, especially following on from a very difficult 2020 and as we navigate this equally strange and challenging year. I can see some of you around here somewhere. It's really lovely to see your faces. Thank you to our major partners, Australia Council, Creative Victoria and the City of Melbourne. We're also proud residents of the Melbourne City of Literature and the Wheeler Centre. Thank you all. Thank you to our principal publishing partner, Hachette Australia, and our principal media partner, The Saturday Paper. Thank you all for investing in emerging storytellers. And now I have to do the part I don't like. Thank you all for being here tonight. No, I like to say thank you to you all. This is the part that's uncomfortable. For making a tax-deductible donation to support the festival you love. And then I've got in my speech here that I wink. Seriously though, making good art costs money, and for us a little bit does go a very long way. Over half our program is free, and we're committed to keeping ticket prices for paid events low so that practicing writers can access the festival. So please do consider donating. You can find out more information on how to do so via the website. We're really proud of this year's program. We hope you enjoy participating in it as much as we've enjoyed putting it together. This year's brilliant artwork is thanks to Daniel Pope, and the design is by Matthias Lanz at Loop Studio. You can head over to the website pretty much now and to see the program in full and start planning your EWF 21. We'll see you in June. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and around the world.